Hello and maadjong adlaw kanatong tanan. It's been a while since I made a video, but I really wanted to make this short and quick video. I hope it's gonna be short. But I really wanted to make this video because I've been approached by many different people online asking me kung unsa man jud ang mga requirements or mga processes para makaulig Bohol. And murag na-realize na ho nga basin wala lang sila nakadawat sa update or basin the information was not able to reach them. So I hope that this video will help all of you who want to go to Bohol from anywhere outside of Bohol and be with your families again soon. So hopefully makatabang ang nga video. So eyes on the board. I have here with me 2 documents with the different travel requirements for LSIs, ROFs, and APORs. So I'll be going through all of them one by one, giving a little bit more of detail to each pointer, and I'll also be giving a little bit of insight regarding my own travels to Bohol back in December and earlier in January. So I was able to travel as an LSI and an APOR. So I'll just be giving a little bit of insight to my experience, just for you guys to have a little bit of an idea as to what happens when you travel in this new or next normal. Okay. First thing that I want to share with you guys is that this video only applies for people who want to go home to Bohol. I'm not sure with the rest of the provinces in the Philippines, but I'm guessing the requirements are different. So, okay, keep that in mind. Second pointer that I want to give, every LGU in Bohol, lahi-lahi ug requirements. All of them were able to have their own management plan. They were allowed to do that by the provincial government of Bohol. So it's important for you to really coordinate with your receiving LGU, because just because Tubigon has this set of requirements, for example, doesn't mean that the next town has the same requirements. So let's start with the requirements for LSIs and ROFs. Number 1, LSIs and ROFs must coordinate with their focal person in their receiving LGU prior to their arrival or prior to their travel to Bohol. So this focal person in your LGU is very important. Get their numbers, get their messenger, and get communicating, because this focal person will give you your LGU's specific requirements which you need to submit. And every requirement might also have sub-requirements or kintahay prerequisites. So it's important for you to really coordinate and communicate with your focal person. Number 2, the LSIs and ROFs must submit the following documentary requirements to their focal person in their LGU in Bohol for them to then receive a certificate of confirmation. So imahang certificate of confirmation dere is imahang main requirement. Pero kana nga certificate of confirmation na ay duha ka prerequisites, which are your medical certificate issued by a licensed physician, and next is your JTF COVID Shield PNP Travel Authority. So these 2 requirements must come from the LGU of origin, or the LGU that you'll be flying from going to Bohol. So just for you guys to have a little bit of a thought as to the documents, the Joint Task Force COVID Shield Travel Authority always has a heading like this, and your name will be on the list as well. And once you receive these documents and you've already sent them to your focal person in your LGU, do not forget to bring this to the airport as well, because at the airport they will be checking this too. So under number 2, we also have this. LSIs and ROFs with a negative PCR result swab sample not taken more than 72 hours prior to arrival in Bohol may avail of the 10 days quarantine in either a community quarantine facility or private quarantine facility, which can be either a home or a hotel. Okay, so recap. LSI ka or ROF na kay negative test results na PCR, 10 days quarantine ra ang kinahanglan. And if it's in a community quarantine facility, dire-diretso na. Pero if you're availing or requesting for a private quarantine facility, whether it's a hotel or your home, This is subject to LGU approval. So you need to have coordinated about this with your focal person, because the LGU will be sending someone to check whether or not your proposed private quarantine facility is suitable. So when it comes to a hotel, I'm not sure as to what the different requirements are. I'm sure your focal person will know that. But when it comes to your home quarantine facility in Tubigon, they sent someone to my parents' house and they asked to check if I had a room of my own and a bathroom of my own. So dapat ang LSI or ROF na mo avail og home quarantine nga 10 days, kinahanglang na ay kawalingon bedroom, kawalingon bathroom. I think those are the main requirements for home quarantine. This needs to be again coordinated well with your focal person. Okay. Letter B under number 2, LSIs and ROFs without a negative PCR test results will automatically have 14 days of quarantine, either in a community quarantine facility or in their private quarantine facility, also subject to LGU approval. So did you see the difference here? If you are an LSI or ROF with a negative PCR test result, 10 days ra ang imong quarantine period. But if you're an LSI or ROF without a negative PCR test result, or if you have not taken a test at all, automatic 14 days imong quarantine. Okay. Number 3, upon arrival in Bohol, LSIs and ROFs will be fetched by their respective receiving LGUs to be brought directly to the community quarantine facility or private quarantine facility, and they must follow the health protocols set out by the LGU. So inig-abot nimo sa airport sa Bohol, dili ka pwede basta-basta glakaw outside of the airport. No, you need to wait for the staff of your LGU to arrive to pick you up and then bring you to your quarantine facility in your LGU. So you will be sharing that ride with other people on the same flight who also live in your LGU. So ang airport staff ang mutawag ninyo ug moingon nga katong mga taga-Tubigon na nadiha inyong service, pwede na mo magawas. So you really have to wait for your queue to be able to go out, because you will not be allowed to do so otherwise. And I think as a tourist, it's your resort that has to send a van and staff to pick you up as well. You cannot go to the resort on your own. But at least my service na. Okay. Requirement number 4, LSIs and ROFs shall be endorsed and closely monitored by the Barangay Health Emergency Response Team until the completion of their prescribed quarantine period. So, inig-abot nimo sa imong quarantine facility, they will check your temperature and they will monitor you every day of your prescribed quarantine period, morning and afternoon. So, tip here is to get your own thermometer, where you can check your own temperature as well, and then also properly update the people of the Health Emergency Response Team of your barangay and LGU. Now, we've gone through all of that already. Once you graduate from your quarantine period, normally your barangay will give you, or at least in my case in Tubigon, my barangay gave me 2 documents. One was a barangay clearance and another one was a barangay certificate. Now, if you also receive those 2 documents, hold on to those 2 documents, because you will need those 2 documents again when you leave Bohol. So it's important that you keep those safe too. All right. So those were the travel requirements for LSIs and ROFs. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section, or you can message me, and I'll do my best to assist you. But of course, nothing beats the focal person of your LGU. Moving on to the travel requirements of authorized persons outside of residence, or APORs. Number 1 is the same as with the previous set of requirements for LSIs and ROFs, and that is that every APOR must also coordinate with their focal person in their receiving LGU before their travel to Bohol. APORs must submit the complete documentary requirements set by their receiving LGU to the focal person for them to be then issued a certificate of confirmation And this is a notable difference. APORs must undergo a PCR test. And the test cannot be taken longer than 72 hours prior to your arrival in Bohol. Kinahanglan within that 72-hour window gihapon ang imahang tests. So that's the main difference, the way I see it, between LSIs and ROFs and APORs. Sa LSI and ROF, the way I understood it, optional ang PCR tests. But then if you take one and it's negative, 10 days quarantine. If you don't take one, 14 days. Pero as an APOR, requirement jud ang PCR test nga negative for you to be able to travel as an APOR. Now, upon arrival in Bohol, the APORs shall be fetched by the receiving LGUs or designated person by the receiving LGUs, and they will be brought directly to their workstations or to the LGU community quarantine or private quarantine facility at the end of the working day and must follow the health protocols set by their LGU. So, as an APOR, you have a maximum of 5 days to stay in the province. You will be asked to present a confirmed return ticket to Bohol and from Bohol for you to be able to travel as an APOR. And when you travel as an APOR, there is no quarantine that you need to comply with. No 10-day quarantine, no 14-day quarantine. You have a purpose to be in Bohol, and you'll be allowed to do that purpose, and you'll be monitored. You will be fetched, you will be brought to the places that you need to be at. So medyo restricted ang imahang movements, really just to your main purpose of travel. So here's a little bit more detail. APORs may be permitted to go only to specified places for the purpose of their visit and are discouraged to go anywhere outside of those specified areas and limit their interaction with individuals other than those directly involved in their main purpose of travel. So APORs who will stay for more than 5 days, diba ingon ko kanina nga 5 days lang ang stay of an APOR in Bohol. Pero if by chance you need to extend, for example, on the 5th day, you will have to take another PCR test or your repeat PCR test. And you shall remain in your quarantine facility after you've taken that test until the results are out. And APORs who want to avail of private quarantine facility must also request the LGU to inspect their homes or their proposed private quarantine facility for approval. Okay, and then APORs shall be endorsed and closely monitored by the receiving LGU until the completion of the purpose of the travel to Bohol. So here, as an APOR, you can travel, yes. There's an up and down side to this, I guess. You can stay without the quarantine requirement of 10 or 14 days, but your movements are still very restricted and very limited, and you will be monitored gihapon. So you really need to coordinate with your focal person very well for you to be able to travel either as LSI, ROF, or APOR. But again, these lists may seem long, pero dili jud na siya imposible. You can really go home, you can be with your family, you can just be in the province and know that it's a possibility. And I hope that this video helps everyone who's watching who wants to go home to Bohol to be able to go home to Bohol. I hope that this little bit of information and insight that I was able to give was helpful. And I'm just going to be giving a little bit more tips, or a few more tips. One is download and sign up to the Trace app before your flight to Bohol. So just download it on your phone, sign up, and you will be assigned your own QR code. And with that app, you can also scan QR codes of the different points during your travel. And you'll be asked to do so. If you don't have, for example, you weren't able to download it and you can't download it when you're there, you can still manually fill up a piece of paper. Pero at least with the Trace app, for the purposes of contact tracing, mas dali. Second thing that I want to say is that you need to schedule your PCR test well. It cannot be longer than 72 hours prior to your arrival in Bohol, but you also need to keep in mind that it takes 24 to 48 hours before you get your test results. So you really need to time your PCR test well so that you get the results on time, but also not to, how do you call it? Also not beyond the 72-hour window. And don't forget, any of your requirements, have a separate folder for all of those so that dali ra siya kaon sa imong bag for presentation at the check-in counters. Okay. I hope that this video was clear. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section or you can message me. I will do my best to entertain all of your questions. But of course, nothing beats the focal person in your LGU. I hope that you will be able to go home. Until then, amping always, and God bless.